And we are back, and with the biggest groundbreaking showdown between AEW and WWE, let's do a discussion, retrospective, and comparisons between the Monday Night Wars between WWE and WCW and the current war raging right now between NXT and AEW for Wednesday Night Wars.
Right.
Peanut Gallery, I will take the leave here, and these are only two wars that matter. We're not going to count Impact versus WWE for like the 5 weeks. Because remember, that was a thing, and I had some people comment on Twitter about it. It's like, okay, that happened for like 5 weeks, and the thing was abysmal. Peanut Gallery, continue.
I might actually do a retrospective on that one at some points in time as well. But anyways, when we talk about the Monday Night Wars, everyone is just going to assume the battle between Nitro and Raw that happened in 1993, 1994. It really kind of took the rest of that decade off in that ratings battle there. But most people don't consider the origins of the Monday Night Wars. The Monday Night Wars did not start on the first episodes of Nitro and Raw going to head-to-head. Actually, it began a lot earlier than that. It began back in the late 80s. It actually began back in the late 80s. So what happened, I don't know if you had heard about it, Black Saturday, when Vince McMahon took over the time slot from TBS Superstation, I believe. They took over the time slot that used to be occupied by Georgia Championship Wrestling. And what had happened was essentially, Georgia Championship Wrestling lost the contract for that Saturday night show in lieu of WWF's main event. That was the primary show at the time. And if you know about the history of the WWF back in the late 80s, this is the big, colorful character era, big stars. You got your Andre the Giants, your Hulk Hogan's, all the colorful characters, and people and people who were fans of Georgia Championship Wrestling were not very happy. One of those people, his name was Ted Turner. Ted Turner bought the Georgia Championship Wrestling name and turned it into what we know as WCW. So when we're considering the comparisons between the war then and the war today, we can't look at just what had occurred in 1993, 4, 5, and all the way up to 2001. We have to also consider the lead up to it, and where we will find most of the comparisons between the Monday Night Wars of yesteryear and the Wednesday Night Wars of today are going to be in those beginning portions. So let's talk. So we talked a little bit about Georgia Championship Wrestling, and how that got taken away from TBS in lieu of WWF's main event. But let's talk about what has happened today up to this point. So the WWE of I guess the mid to late 2010s. Was in a very similar position to what it was back in the 80s. It was the show on television. It was the big show on television. It was the big guy in town. And there were many talents in the North American wrestling market who were not happy with the WWE system. They were not satisfied with it. Chief among those are Cody, the Young Bucks, and that is where they get the idea to do something on their own. So the Elite, they started this process of creating a product that is alternative to the WWE, just like what Ted Turner had done with WCW back in the day. And eventually it morphed itself into a larger brand known as AEW. So the first comparison I'm going to make as a result of the Monday Night Wars and the Wednesday Night Wars, it is based around a personal and professional rivalry. Now, let's talk about who the personal and professional rivals were. The personal rivals of yesteryear, Vince McMahon and Ted Turner. Ted Turner wanted a product to compete with Vince McMahon. Today, that rivalry has shifted from Cody, from Ted Turner and Vince McMahon to Cody and Triple H.
But keep in mind also, with the Ted Turner comparison, that Ted Turner really wanted wrestling because wrestling was good ratings for him at the time.
Right.
And because McMahon bought out Georgia Championship Wrestling.
He didn't buy it out. He bought the tapings.
Right. He bought the tapings for it, and Ted Turner's animosity was that McMahon did not want to be on his channel.
Right.
So, because McMahon, I believe, was on
their competitors.
He was on their competitors. And Ted Turner wanted to negotiate something with Vince, but Vince would not want to do that, and he was mad that it took away from his promotion that they were bought out.
Okay.
Anyway, go ahead.
Please let me finish my monologue here.
No.
God, go sit back down.
My show, bitch.
Go sit down. So again, we are comparing Cody and Triple H today with the yesteryears of Vince McMahon and Ted Turner, and you've seen that. We have seen inklings where Triple H took some jabs, and then Cody took some jabs, just like what had happened back in the day. The other similarity is that it began as a result of a change in the way in which wrestling was viewed and presented on television. So look at WWE as it is presented today. It's a very PG, a lot of cartoony-esque kind of products. Whereas people were looking for that alternative. And so people went to WCW because it provided the alternative, just like people are going to AEW today. And and also the similarities come from the fact, again, it was this lack of diversity within the wrestling community. Now I can view that lack of diversity as a similarity and as a difference. So what is the difference between the environment of the Monday Night Wars, at least at the beginning, and the Wednesday Night Wars of today? When the Monday Night Wars began, there were only two players in town. It was WCW and WWF. There were not a lot of other promotions, and almost none of them had a major television deal. With the notable exception of ECW back in the late 90s into the early 2000s, but there was not the diversity of wrestling that you see today. Today we have so much wrestling. You have Japanese wrestling, we have Extreme Wrestling, we have Impact, we have NWA, we have ROH, we have Access. Even if we don't see them on live television every week, there is so much diversity out there that the environment of professional wrestling today is not like it was back in the late 80s into the early 90s. But again, that just comes with technology. That's one of the major differences. The other one that I want to point out is that the landscape is not cutthroat. When we're talking about Vince McMahon and Ted Turner, they were pushing to put each other out of business. They didn't want to just win the rating wars. They wanted to fucking bankrupt one another, which almost happened a few times. Eventually it happened because Ted Turner sold off WCW to Time Warner, and then WCW went bankrupt. Today,
I'm sorry. That's not necessarily true. The Time Warner, the AOL Time Warner deal was a merger,
right?
And Ted Turner's power did not happen. He did not sell WCW to anybody.
He sold his stakes though, didn't he sell off his stocks? He wasn't president after a while.
Well, he wasn't president of Turner,
right?
Because WCW was a private company.
Right, but he owned WCW.
He owned WCW. He didn't sell it. It was an asset under Turner Broadcasting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a merger, and he wasn't in power anymore. So he did not
sell it off, but he lost control of it.
Yes, he lost direct control because at that time Ted Turner was the only person who still wanted wrestling on television, and as soon as that happened, a new board of directors came in.
Right. Anyways, so he keeps interrupting here because apparently...
I'm sorry. When I hear bullshit, I'm going to call you out on it.
Go back and start drinking. Okay, so anyways, today the competition is not as cutthroat. I don't see Cody trying to put Vince McMahon out of business, or Tony Khan, or whoever owns Shahid Khan, whoever owns AEW. They're not trying to put each other out of business. It's competition. So they are mutually they are competing with each other, but it's not a malevolent kind of competition. It's just not there. And again, I think this stems largely because there's so much wrestling out there that the WWE they cannot be the only people in town. They know that. There needs to be some diversity. The other one too that I found interesting, and especially in later years, was that there was not. And it may happen in the future, but we're still so early in the Wednesday Night Wars that I can say that it doesn't have quite the pop culture impact, the wrestling impact. The Monday Night Wars were way more impactful to the professional wrestling community than the Wednesday Night Wars are up to this point. Again, we're so early. We're so early in the game with the Wednesday Night Wars. That we cannot foresee what's going to happen the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years. But I found it very interesting that there was a lot of similarities between the beginnings of the Monday Night Wars and the beginnings of the Wednesday Night Wars, insofar as that we look at the environments in which this rivalry was created, and they were very similar. With terms of the characters at play and what they were seeking to do. And it only remains to be seen as to how far this war is eventually going to go. At this point in time, we are going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have a short little dialogue, and Tiger High will answer any questions, but we'll see you on the other side.
And we are back. So with the brief synopsis and discussion about what Peanut Gallery said, we're going to have just maybe a, 5-10 minute open
Yeah, probably
forum.
about 10 to 15 minute open forum.
Yeah, that's fine.
To round out the show here. So
Peanut Gallery, all of that was very interesting. And but I don't think you touched on like some of the wars that or attempted wars that happened.
Oh, well, because we are only focusing on two different
but other companies have tried to take on WWE, such as WCW, but I think there are some aspects here that we look back at the Monday Night Wars in a different light than what we're seeing with AEW and NXT.
Right.
Not just because that one is currently going on.
Right.
And you're right. It's not a competition. They're not trying to drive each other out of business.
Right.
It's like Walmart and Target. They're not trying to drive each other out of business.
Right.
They're giving you an alternative product overall.
Right.
What I feel that I think should be known is that those times back in the 90s, it was so drastically different because not only did it come off of the 80s when wrestling was so popular that you can't even see straight to where it is now, where this is a coming about for wrestling.
Right.
Wrestling is now starting to become popular again. And there's no star like Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock. They're getting there.
But again, we're at the we're so early into the Wednesday Night Wars.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's why I don't look at the actual ratings of everything because
you can now
because the ratings never told the whole story with the Monday Night Wars. You really have to go back and see.
That was the supremacy at the time because everything was focused.
But
around
you have to
it.
look back at the characters and their motivations when it comes to the creation of a product like this. And I thought it was very interesting that the Monday Night Wars actually actually started because Ted Turner was not happy about the state of the wrestling business and wanted to change it.
Yeah, and then also he wanted to bankrupt Vince McMahon too.
Right.
He was very like cynical. Where Cody
and again, that is where the difference comes in, is that Cody, Shahid, and Tony Khan are not.
They're not trying to bankrupt WWE.
They're not trying to bankrupt WWE. It's more of a competition, and you don't see the WWE going out of their way to try and bankrupt the Khans on the other end.
Well, no, absolutely not, because number one, they won't be able to. The Khans are not going to go bankrupt anytime soon.
Right, but I think because, too, it's a new generation. You don't have Vince McMahon at the helms. You have Triple H at the helms of the NXT brand.
Right.
And I think that Triple H's values about business and competition are different than what Vince sees.
Right. Well, Vince McMahon was on the defensive end with the WCW
He was.
thing. Also, the cultural significance of the Monday Night Wars was present then, and it's present now, where like you said, it's still very fresh.
We wouldn't have called it the Wednesday Night Wars if we didn't have something to compare it to.
Right. Now, the Wednesday Night Wars, you're right, it's very young, and, it took them a minute for WCW to start getting some ground on WWE. AEW is in a much better position overall.
Right.
And a lot of people are like, oh, look at the ratings, look at the ratings. The ratings necessarily don't matter because
the ratings only tell a part of the story.
The viewing habits of the current generation and the people who absorb wrestling now are so much different than what it was back in the 90s.
Right, because back in the 90s, the viewership was everything.
Because television was the only place really to see it. The internet was not a thing too much at this point.
Right.
And obviously, there's the New Japan factor that was not even remotely touched on in this culture.
No.
There was not Evolve, obviously not now, but there wasn't Evolve, there wasn't Ring of Honor, there wasn't anything else other than these two, and maybe.
And again, that's what I touch on, is that the landscape today is so much different.
Right, and people are trying to compare these two, like, oh, they don't get the ratings. It doesn't matter at this point.
Right.
Now, it's like 700,000 viewers is pretty freaking good, but if it was compared to the Monday Night Wars, that would be crickets.
That would be pitiful, right?
Because they were getting like 9.1 million viewers.
Right.
The most watched match of all time was during the Monday Night Wars. It was Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Undertaker for the WWF champion. It had 11.1 million people watching it.
Right.
If one of these two got that kind of numbers, that'd be fucking bonkers.
Right. But, again, we just don't see that. The landscape is so much different. But, again, that's why I focused more on the genesis of the movement to create the wars.
Right.
Because there are similarities there. There are similarities. Do you think that the conditions back in the 80s with WWF was the same as the condition of WWE back in the 2010s?
Not even remotely close.
I mean, I'm talking like the kinds of people and characters, and then you have these fans who are longing for something more serious.
Right.
I think that really CM Punk started a lot of that too.
He did. Well, he cut the promo that really exposed a lot of what other people were thinking.
Right.
And, with Daniel Bryan coming in as well.
Yeah.
I think a lot of other people, including Cody, Young Bucks, and them, saw that no matter what, even an indie star with the support of the people can be a thing. And I know that you don't technically agree with me about what was the antithesis of AEW. I think it was All In. Because it was...
Well, it's not the antithesis, it's the genesis. And I agree with you. It is All In.
Because if All In was not successful, AEW would not exist.
Right.
I think that was like Cody and the Young Bucks are going to show that they can do this.
Right.
And if that was not as popular as it is now, where it's like this is a mega show that did not have a promotion attached to it, really.
Right.
They had like matches with the Ring of Honor, but it wasn't really there.
Right. But again, it just shows, like, I think that back in the 80s, a lot of people were angry. They wanted something alternative to the WWF because, especially after the loss of Georgia Championship Wrestling on a major television station, to replace it with the cartoony WWF.
It was not what they wanted. They had more serious wrestlers.
And so then you have the mid to late 2010s.
And WCW tried to compete with WWE at their level, and then Eric Bischoff came in. Remember this. Eric Bischoff came in like 2 or 3 years after Ted Turner bought WCW and rebranded it. So, you got, your Ric Flairs and Stings, but Eric Bischoff was like, let's just go with what pop culture is and make it grunge. And Eric Bischoff's idea of the NWO came from a New Japan Pro Wrestling idea. It was an invading thing with All Japan. That's what that was.
So again, there are a lot of similarities. I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make, is that there are absolutely a lot of similarities between the environment and the environment now.
My question is, the numbers of both shows are going up. No matter what, they're getting more and more people watching the product. It's jumping. But do you think that in 3 years, let's say, if this is still going on, do you think wrestling will once again become mainstream pop culture like it was in the 90s?
No.
You don't think so? You don't think there will be an event in 3 years like what WCW was? Because, we're not even a year into this.
I don't think this is going to happen. I think there are, again, you're talking about too many different cultural forces at play. It could happen, but I doubt it's going to happen.
It would have to be a perfect storm of a lot of different things for that to happen. I am going to hold out and say that I'm saying that it could happen,
but it may not even be on Wednesdays. We might actually have Monday Night Wars 2.0 if AEW becomes that popular that they think that they can compete with Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown.
Well, NXT is even getting somewhat. They're growing where Raw and SmackDown are like abysmal. So there could be a time, and like I said, 2 or 3 years where these two shows, AEW and NXT, are getting like 3 million viewers on regular television.
And it might not even be AEW. It might be AEW Dark because AEW Dynamite moves to Mondays.
And that was a talk what TNT wants, because TNT have just been ecstatic about this. It's the highest rated show that they have per week. So
I mean, it's definitely a possibility. Again, we're in a culture where things are changing so constantly that we just don't know, and there are a lot of forces at play. But I thought that if we want to find similarities between the Monday Night Wars and the Wednesday Night Wars, we have to go beyond what the numbers are saying, because there is a lot going on beforehand that really helped, and that's why I think that this is successful. The Raw versus TNA Impact was not successful because the people behind the move were not passionate about the state of the industry. They were not excited about actually providing that alternative.
And guess what? WWE knew for a while that Impact was going to try to compete with them, and they were laughing at it. Because this is not an AEW show where it was making gigantic waves at the time. Now, if TNA did something very similar to what they did back in like 2004, 5, 6, when they were signing like Kurt Angle, Samoa Joe,
that could have worked.
Then they would actually have some competition, but it became too WWE-esque. It's like, you had Sting versus Christian Cage, and that got huge numbers even then. You had Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels tearing down the house. Do you think that WWE might have been a little bit nervous if they did something like that against them? That would have been incredible,
But we digress. But I'm curious to see how it's going to evolve, and I think that what's happening is interesting. It's not cutthroat. It's competition.
Well, that was the same thing with the territories. The territories did not want to put each other out of business. They were cooperating with each other.
Right.
Because they were like, if your business is successful, my business is going to be successful.
Right.
And like I said, the numbers are not lying. The ratings for both of them are doing this.
They're going up.
They're going up for NXT and AEW, and that's something that they wanted.
Right.
And I think I think Triple H does understand that.
That diversity within the professional wrestling industry is a good thing.
Right. And there was big money behind AEW, and they're doing big things that are going viral on something that they focus on, which is the internet.
Right.
And I think that's a really good thing. I think now that's what's going to become popular.
Right.
Instead of the Nielsen ratings, it's going to go what segments are going to go viral next.
Right.
Or the closest to.
Right.
So
we'll see. But is there anything else before we close out here that you wanted to mention?
So we're talking about this because after next Wednesday, this is like the first true clash, and we really wanted to have a comparison of the two significant wars that happened as a part of professional wrestling.
So next week we are going to actually do the results for both shows,
and we're going to do what they did good and bad. We're going to do a lot of comparisons, especially
that'll be the longest,
and also ratings.
Right, that'll be the longest segment of the show.
And we're also going to be covering Dominion, which is going to be a very significant show. So
we'll cover that one last. So next week we are going to do AEW and WWE's shows to do a comparison, and then we're going to talk about Dominion.
And then the news, because you never know what's going to happen with the news.
Right. And then the week after that, we'll be covering Slammiversary and Extreme Rules. And then after that, we're going to take a short break for a week. We'll let you guys know ahead of time.
We will be out of town the final week, so either one or two things are going to happen. We'll do like a quick video.
I don't think we're going to do anything.
Well, if we have think of a topic that's really exciting,
I think that topic can wait 1 week.
I know.
I think that exciting topic can wait 1 week.
Right. We'll let you guys know further once we get closer to that date. But
anyways, a lot of pay-per-views coming up. Why don't you just do the closing spiel?
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. If you enjoyed the show, feel free to follow our channel wherever you're watching this, on Spotify to iTunes. And if you really enjoy it, follow us on social media and become a patron so you can watch the shows with us, with our watch parties, because everyone's trying to copy us. We're innovators. I know, I get it. It's fine. But
what?
I know, we're the greatest thing on fucking YouTube. So if you guys did enjoy it, feel free to subscribe and follow and share it with your friends. We really do appreciate the support that we get. And as always, be
majestic.